What happens when a royal guest mistakes morning television for her personal throne? In just 36 seconds, one comment would turn a friendly interview into the most shocking moment in daytime TV history. This is the story of how Meghan Markle went from composed duchess to combative diva, live on Good Morning America. The morning started like any other at the Good Morning America studio in New York City. The crew buzzed with their usual energy, checking cameras, adjusting lights, and making sure every detail was perfect. The makeup artists were touching up their final brushes. The sound technicians were testing microphones. The producers were pacing back and forth with their clipboards, running through the schedule one more time. Everything was running like clockwork. This was a well-oiled machine, and everyone knew their role. Michael Strahan sat in his chair, going over his notes one last time. His coffee was still steaming in the mug beside him. He had done thousands of interviews before, thousands. Athletes, actors, politicians, musicians. He had talked to some of the biggest names in the world, and he knew how to make people feel comfortable. He knew how to ask the right questions. He knew how to listen. This was supposed to be easy. A simple conversation about her latest projects, maybe some questions about her life, her work, her plans for the future, and everyone goes home happy. That was the plan. That was always the plan. But plans have a funny way of falling apart when you least expect them to. When Meghan Markle walked onto the set, something felt different. The atmosphere changed. Not in the warm, excited way that usually comes with a celebrity guest. This was something else. Something colder. Something heavier. She moved across the studio floor with an expression that seemed to say she was doing everyone a favor just by being there. Her smile was thin, practiced, the kind of smile that does not quite reach the eyes, the kind that looks perfect in photographs but feels empty in person. The crew noticed it immediately. A few of them exchanged glances. Others kept their heads down, focusing on their jobs, but they all felt it, that shift in the air, that tension that was not there a moment before. Michael stood up to greet her like he always did. Professional, warm, genuine. He had no reason to think this would be anything other than a normal interview. He extended his hand and welcomed her to the show with that smile that had made him one of the most beloved hosts on television. "Good morning. Thanks so much for being here. We are really excited to have you," Michael said, his voice carrying that natural warmth that put most guests at ease. Meghan barely looked at him. She gave a slight nod, more acknowledgement than greeting, and took her seat. She adjusted her outfit as if the cameras were not already rolling. She smoothed down her jacket. She checked her hair. She took her time, as if the entire studio was waiting on her schedule rather than the other way around. The studio audience, packed with people who had waited in line for hours just to be there, clapped politely. Their applause was genuine, excited even. These were people who had come to see a show. They had come to be part of something fun, but even they could sense it. Something was off. The energy was not right. It was like watching storm clouds gather on what was supposed to be a sunny day. Michael sat down and glanced at his notes. He started with the basics, the easy questions, the ones that every guest gets. The ones designed to warm people up, to get them talking, to make them comfortable. "So, you have been working on some exciting new projects lately. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about what you have been up to? What have you been focusing on?" It was simple, open-ended, friendly. The kind of question designed to let a guest shine, to let them talk about whatever they wanted to promote, whatever they were passionate about. It was the softest of softballs. A gift, really. Meghan looked at him like he had just asked her to explain the meaning of life. She paused, letting the silence hang there for a beat too long. Then she sighed, actually sighed, as if answering this question was some kind of burden. "Well, Michael, I think the real question is why the media is so obsessed with what I do instead of focusing on the real issues happening in the world. There are children going hungry. There are wars happening. There are people suffering. But instead of talking about that, we are sitting here talking about me." There it was. The first crack in what was supposed to be a friendly morning chat. The audience shifted in their seats. A few people glanced at each other, unsure if this was part of the plan or if something was actually going wrong. Michael did not flinch. He had dealt with difficult guests before. He had interviewed people who were nervous, people who were guarded, people who had axes to grind. This was not his first rodeo. He smiled, that same warm smile, and tried to redirect the conversation back to something productive. "I think people are just really interested in your work and what you are passionate about. That is why we wanted to have you here today, to give you a platform to talk about the things that matter to you. So what are those things? What are you working on right now that you are excited about? It was perfect. He had acknowledged her concern, validated her point about serious issues, and then gently guided the conversation back to where it needed to be. This is what good hosts do. They listen, they adapt, they find a way to make it work. But Meghan was not having it. She shifted in her seat, crossed her legs, and let out a small, dismissive laugh. The kind of laugh that is not really a laugh at all. The kind that says, you think the other person is being ridiculous. Interested in my work? Or interested in tearing me down? Because from where I am, sitting, Michael, it seems like the latter. It always seems like the latter. Every time I sit down for an interview, every time I try to talk about the things I care about, it somehow turns into this game where I am supposed to defend myself. The audience went quiet. You could hear the cameras humming. You could hear someone cough in the back row. The tension was spreading through the room like a wave, touching everyone, making everyone uncomfortable. Michael, always the professional, took a breath and tried one more time to keep things on track. His voice remained calm, measured, respectful. I can promise you, that is not what this is about. That is not why you are here. We are just here to have a conversation. I want to give you a chance to share your story with our audience, to talk about the work you are doing, to connect with people who care about the same things you do. That is all this is. He was being more than fair, more than kind, more than patient. He was giving her every opportunity to turn this around, to engage in the conversation he was trying to have with her. But kindness did not seem to register with Meghan. Understanding did not seem to matter. She leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and looked directly into the camera instead of at Michael. It was a deliberate choice, a power move. She was not talking to him anymore. She was talking past him, through him, around him. You want my story? Fine. Here is my story. My story is that I have been treated unfairly by this industry, by the press, by the media machine that chews people up and spits them out, by people like you who sit in your comfortable chairs and ask your comfortable questions and pretend like you actually care about the answers. But you do not care. You just want a headline. You just want something to put on social media. You just want the clicks. People like you. Those three words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. The crew members behind the cameras glanced at each other with wide eyes. The producers in the control room scrambled, their voices urgent in the headsets. This was not how interviews were supposed to go. This was not how guests were supposed to act. This was not normal. Michael took a breath, a long, slow breath. His expression remained calm, composed, but you could see something shift in his eyes, a hardening, a realization. He was a professional. He had always been a professional. But he was also not going to sit there and be insulted on his own show. Not in front of his crew, not in front of his audience, not in front of millions of people watching at home. I understand that you have had your challenges. I understand that you have faced difficulties. And I respect that. I truly do. But I want to be clear about something. I invited you here with nothing but respect, nothing but good intentions. I think you might be confusing this conversation with something else. This is not an attack. This is not an ambush. This is just two people talking. His words were careful, measured, but firm. He was drawing a line, setting a boundary, saying, without saying it directly, that there was a way to behave as a guest, and this was not it. That should have been it. A moment to reset, a chance for Meghan to take a step back, to take a breath, to realize she was speaking to someone who was genuinely trying to make the interview work, someone who had not said a single unkind word to her, someone who had only tried to be respectful and professional. But instead, she doubled down. She leaned forward, her voice rising, her words coming faster. Confusing? No, Michael, I am not confused at all. I am not confused one bit. I know exactly what this is. This is another attempt to put me in a box, to make me answer questions on your terms instead of mine, to fit me into whatever narrative you have already decided on before I even walk through that door. I am done playing that game. I am done pretending like these interviews are anything other than traps. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Every person in that studio was frozen, watching, waiting to see what would happen next. This had gone from uncomfortable to unbearable in the span of minutes. Michael leaned forward slightly. His voice was still even, still controlled, but there was a firmness to it now that had not been there before. A steel underneath the calm. I am not sure what game you think this is, but I can tell you right now, there is no agenda here. There is no trap. There is no narrative. We invited you because people want to hear from you, because they are interested in what you have to say. But if you are not interested in having a respectful conversation, if you are going to sit here and attack me for trying to do my job, then maybe this is not the right place for you today." It was a line in the sand, a clear, unmistakable boundary. He had given her chance after chance to engage like a reasonable person, and she had thrown every single one of those chances back in his face. Now, he was done trying, and for a second, just a second, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, Meghan would pull back. Maybe she would realize she had pushed too far. Maybe she would see that she was in the wrong here. But she did not. She did not pull back. She did not apologize. She did not even pause to consider what he had said. Instead, her eyes flashed, her jaw tightened. And when she spoke again, her voice was loud enough that the microphones picked up every single word with perfect clarity. "Not the right place for me? How dare you? How dare you sit there and tell me where I should and should not be? Do you have any idea who I am? Do you have any idea what I have been through? What I have sacrificed? What I have given up? You sit here in your comfortable little chair, in your comfortable little studio, asking your comfortable little questions, and you have the audacity, the absolute audacity, to tell me this is not the right place for me?" Her voice was rising now, not quite yelling, but close, the kind of controlled anger that was somehow even more uncomfortable than an outright shout, the kind that made everyone in the room want to look away, but unable to stop watching. The audience was frozen. Some people looked down at their hands, embarrassed to be witnessing this. Others stared in disbelief, their mouths slightly open. A few had their phones out, recording, knowing that what they were seeing was going to be talked about for days. Michael remained calm, remarkably, impossibly calm. He sat there, his hands folded in his lap, his expression neutral. He had every right to fire back, every right to defend himself, every right to match her energy with his own. But he did not. He refused to. Instead, he took a moment, a long moment. He looked directly at her, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet, steady, clear. "I know exactly who you are. I know your story. I know what you have been through because you have talked about it many times in many different forums, and I have never once questioned your experiences or your feelings. But that does not give you the right to come on this show and disrespect me. It does not give you the right to disrespect this platform. It does not give you the right to attack me for trying to have a conversation with you. I have been nothing but professional with you from the moment you walked in here, nothing but respectful, and I deserve that same respect in return." It was the truth, plain and simple, undeniable, and everyone watching knew it. Everyone in that studio, everyone in that audience, everyone watching at home on their televisions and their phones and their computers, they all knew it. Michael had done nothing wrong. He had asked basic questions. He had been kind. He had been patient. He had tried, over and over again, to make the interview work. And in return, he had been accused of having an agenda, of being part of some media conspiracy, of not caring about real issues. But Meghan was not done. Even after everything Michael had said, even after he had laid out the truth so clearly that there was no way to misunderstand it, she was not done. She stood up from her chair. The movement was sudden, sharp. The microphone was still clipped to her jacket, picking up the rustling of fabric, the sharp intake of breath, everything. "Professional? You call this professional? You call bringing me on here just to ambush me with your loaded questions professional? I should have known better. I should have known better than to trust this. To trust you. To trust mainstream media and their games. This whole thing, this entire setup, it is a joke. And I am not going to sit here and be part of it anymore." She reached down and yanked the microphone off her jacket. The sound was loud, jarring, amplified through every speaker in the studio. She tossed it onto the chair behind her like it was trash, like it meant nothing, like the entire show and everyone working on it meant nothing. And then she started walking toward the exit, walking away from Michael, from the cameras, from the audience, from everything. The studio was silent except for the sound of her heels clicking against the floor. Click, click, click. Each step echoing through the space like a drumbeat. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment. The producers in the control room were yelling into their headsets, trying to figure out what to do, how to handle this, whether to cut to commercial or keep rolling. The audience sat there, completely stunned. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They just watched as Meghan Markle walked off the set of Good Morning America in the middle of a live broadcast. Michael did not chase after her. He did not yell. He did not lose his composure. He did not do anything except sit there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then, slowly, he turned to face the camera. His expression was a mixture of surprise and resignation, the look of someone who had just witnessed something they never expected to see. "Well," he said, shaking his head slightly, a small, almost disbelieving smile on his face. "That was unexpected. That was definitely not what we had planned for this morning. We will take a quick break and be right back with more Good Morning America." The feed cut to commercial, but the damage was done. The moment was captured, every second of it, every word, every expression, every movement. All of it recorded, all of it witnessed by millions of people. Behind the scenes, the control room erupted into chaos. Producers were on their phones immediately. Publicists were scrambling, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to explain it, how to make it look like anything other than what it obviously was. But Michael, he just sat there for a moment, quiet, still, processing what had just happened, trying to understand how a simple morning interview had turned into this. One of the crew members, a young woman who had been working on the show for years, came over to check on him. Her face was concerned, sympathetic. "Are you okay? That was intense," she said quietly. So the microphones would not pick it up. Michael nodded, letting out a long breath. Yeah, I am good. I am fine. Just did not see that coming. Not at all." And he really did not. Because despite all his years in the business, despite all the interviews and all the tough conversations and all the unpredictable guests he had dealt with over the years, he had never experienced anything quite like this. He had asked simple questions, respectful questions. He had done everything right. He had been nothing but professional, nothing but kind. And somehow, despite all of that, it had spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable, most shocking moments in live television history. The audience was still sitting there, still processing. Some people were whispering to each other now, their voices hushed and urgent. Others were checking their phones, already seeing clips of the interview starting to spread online. Social media was exploding. Twitter was going crazy. Instagram was flooded with reposts. It had only been a few minutes since Meghan had walked off, but the internet moves fast, and this was the kind of moment that the internet absolutely lived for. When the show came back from commercial break, Michael addressed what had happened with the same grace and professionalism he had shown throughout the entire ordeal. As you all just saw, our interview with Meghan Markle took an unexpected turn this morning. We always aim to create a space where our guests feel comfortable sharing their stories, where they feel respected and heard. And we are disappointed that things did not go as planned today. But we want to thank you, our amazing audience here in the studio and everyone watching at home, for being here with us through all of this. Let us move forward with the rest of the show. It was classy. It was measured. It was diplomatic. It was everything you would expect from someone like Michael Strahan. He did not throw blame. He did not take cheap shots. He did not try to make himself look better by making her look worse. He simply acknowledged what had happened, expressed disappointment that it had not worked out, and moved on with dignity. But even as the show continued with its other segments, even as Michael interviewed other guests and talked about other topics, the moment lingered. You could feel it hanging in the air. The crew felt it. The audience felt it. The millions of people watching at home felt it too. What had started as a routine morning interview had turned into something much, much bigger. A moment that would be replayed over and over again. A moment that would be analyzed and debated and discussed for days, weeks, maybe even months. And at the center of it all was a simple, undeniable truth that everyone could see. Michael Strahan had done absolutely nothing wrong. He had been respectful from the very beginning. He had been professional in every sense of the word. He had given Meghan every single opportunity to share her story, to talk about her projects, to connect with the audience in a meaningful way. And in return, she had accused him of having an agenda. She had dismissed his questions as traps. She had insulted him to his face. And then she had stormed off the set like a child throwing a tantrum. The contrast could not have been clearer if someone had drawn it with a marker. On one side, you had a seasoned professional trying to do his job. On the other side, you had a guest who seemed more interested in making a statement, in proving a point, in being the victim, than in actually having a conversation. As the cameras rolled and the show wrapped up for the day, the studio began to empty out. The audience filed out slowly, their conversations animated, their faces still showing signs of shock and disbelief. They had come expecting a normal morning show. They had gotten something they would never forget. The crew started breaking down the set, their conversations filled with the same sense of disbelief. Everyone had an opinion, everyone had something to say, but they all agreed on one thing. They had never seen anything like that before, not in all their years working in television. Michael sat in his dressing room afterward, finally allowing himself a moment to decompress. He scrolled through his phone, watching as the clips spread across every platform imaginable. The footage was everywhere: Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok. Every single social media platform was flooded with videos of the interview, with commentary, with hot takes, with reactions. Everyone had an opinion. Some people were defending Meghan, trying to argue that she had every right to be upset, that the media had treated her unfairly in the past, that she was justified in her reaction. But those voices were few and far between. The overwhelming response, the response that dominated every comment section and every discussion thread, was clear. She had crossed a line, a big line. People were not just talking about what she said. They were talking about how she said it, the tone of her voice, the disrespect dripping from every word, the entitlement in her posture, in her expressions, in the way she had looked at Michael like he was beneath her. It was one thing to be frustrated with the media. It was one thing to have had bad experiences in the past, but it was another thing entirely to take that frustration out on someone who was actively trying to help you, someone who had shown you nothing but kindness. Michael did not respond to any of it publicly. He did not issue a statement. He did not go on Twitter to defend himself. He did not do any of that. And he did not need to. The footage spoke for itself. Anyone who watched the interview, anyone who saw what had happened with their own eyes, could see the truth. There was no spin required, no narrative to push, no editing tricks to manipulate the story. Just a straightforward, honest recording of a conversation that went off the rails because one person refused to engage in good faith. That night, as the story continued to dominate headlines and trending topics, people started dissecting every single moment of the interview. Media analysts watched the body language. They listened to the subtle changes in tone. They noticed how Meghan had refused to make eye contact with Michael, how she had looked away from him when he tried to be kind, how she had crossed her arms defensively, how her entire posture screamed hostility from the moment she sat down. They noticed how Michael, in contrast, had remained open and welcoming throughout the entire ordeal, how his body language never shifted to match her hostility, how he had kept trying, kept extending olive branches, kept offering her chances to turn things around, and how, even when he finally drew a line and told her this was not okay, he did it with respect. With firmness, yes, but with respect. And through it all, one thing became absolutely crystal clear to anyone paying attention. This was not about the questions Michael had asked. It was not about the media. It was not even about the interview itself. This was about someone who had walked into that studio with a chip on her shoulder the size of a boulder, ready to fight a battle that no one else was even trying to have. Someone who had decided before the interview even started that she was going to be the victim no matter what happened. Michael Strahan had extended an olive branch that morning. He had offered kindness and respect and professionalism, and Meghan Markle had not just rejected that olive branch. She had snapped it in half, thrown it on the ground, and walked all over it. The next morning, when Michael arrived back at the studio to tape another show, he was greeted with an outpouring of support from everyone around him. His co-host pulled him aside to tell him how well he had handled the situation. The crew gave him pats on the back and words of encouragement. People from other networks, other shows, other corners of the industry reached out to let him know they had his back. Because everyone who worked in television, everyone who understood what it took to host a show, knew exactly what had happened. They knew he had handled an impossible situation with grace and dignity. And as for Meghan, she had made her statement. She had walked off that set thinking she had proven a point, thinking she had stood up for herself against the big bad media machine, thinking she had shown everyone that she would not be pushed around or controlled or manipulated. But all she had really done, all she had actually accomplished, was show the entire world exactly who she was when things did not go her way, when she did not get the treatment she thought she deserved, when someone dared to treat her like a normal guest instead of royalty. Because here is the thing about live television that Meghan seemed to have forgotten. You cannot hide when the cameras are rolling. You cannot edit your way out of a bad moment. You cannot control the narrative when millions of people are watching everything unfold in real time. You cannot spin it or reframe it or pretend it did not happen the way it happened. And when you choose to lash out at someone who is trying to treat you with respect, when you choose to be hostile and combative for no good reason, people notice. They see it, they remember it, and they form their opinions based on what they saw, not on what you wish they had seen. They notice, and they do not forget.